I say it all the time, and I truly mean it, to be a part of people's smile times in their lives, you can't beat it.
Their vocals left an indelible impression. Dionne Warwick's velvety soul and Karen Carpenter's crystal-clear, emotionally raw voice. Despite their stylistic differences, these two ladies had a significant influence on the music of their time. Heartbreaks, reunions, late-night trips, and solitary contemplation were all situations that their music encapsulated. Warwick brought Burt Bacharach's graceful melodies to life, while Carpenter's eerie performance gave depth to even the most basic lyrics. Their respect for one another was profound, even if their professions were more separate than interwoven. Dionne is now removing the curtain, not for show, but to remember a soul she never forgot, and a voice she silently valued, Karen. This is happening decades after her tragic death. In addition to fame, the replies show a narrative of silent sorrow, profound admiration, and the enduring impact of a special friendship. In the annals of American music, Dionne Warwick's voice is among the most revered and evergreen. She has been active for almost 60 years, during which time she has garnered 5 Grammy Awards and sold over 100 million recordings globally. Warwick collaborated closely with renowned songwriters Burt Bacharach and Hal David, and from the early 1960s onward, she made her mark in the music business by blending pop, soul, and R&B. Dionne was not only financially successful, but she also broke new ground as one of the first black female musicians to reach the top of the pop charts without watering down her sound or image. Fame, pressure, and public scrutiny can take a toll on musicians, as Dionne Warwick saw firsthand during a transformational and volatile era in music history. She has always been forthright about the toll that fame has on people's mental health, both her own and that of those close to her. In a business sometimes based on deception, her honesty and empathy have made her renowned as both a singer and a truth-teller, always emphasizing the importance of being genuine rather than trying to fool others. She has been a mentor and support system for many younger artists throughout the years. Dionne's longevity, in addition to her celebrity, gives her a tremendous viewpoint. She has seen several artistic eras pass by, and she has seen some of those artists die while still being recognized by the institutions that came before them. She sensed a spirit in Karen Carpenter who, despite her achievements, was unable to rest or be fulfilled. Warwick's knowledge and understanding are based on first-hand experience and empathy rather than speculation or hearsay. Dionne, who also survived the business that mistreated Karen, has a voice as smooth and genuine as someone who will never forget the person behind the song. One of Dionne's most introspective works was shaped by a subtle relationship that existed behind the scenes of her legendary career. The bond between Dionne Warwick and Karen Carpenter was one of subtle camaraderie, an emotional connection based on shared appreciation for music that blossomed into a lasting friendship. Their relationship developed in private, despite the fact that both ladies were profoundly affected by the pressures of stardom and the high expectations put on artists. Dionne, who had already made a name for herself by the time the Carpenters became famous in the early 1970s, saw a soulmate in Karen whose voice radiated an intimacy and fragility that struck a chord. Their professional paths intersected frequently, but it was in the more intimate moments, backstage conversations, looks at industry gatherings, and a developing familiarity, that their bond started to take shape. Karen and Dionne shared a deep appreciation for artistry and nuance in performance, even if their musical approaches were different. Neither one of them was showy or dependent on theatrics to make their point. Nobody missed that resemblance. Dionne reflected on her own experience collaborating with composers like Bacharach and David as she listened to Karen's devastatingly clear interpretations of lyrics. They didn't always spend every moment together, but they did become close in a steady, respectful way. This bond was strengthened by their shared experience of navigating a society that valued superficiality and performance more than genuine health and happiness. Consistent and genuine, their friendship was everything from showy or ostentatious. No matter how much Dionne cared about Karen, she would never step in. Being there for one another was more important than helping or rescuing each other in their friendship. Karen felt safe enough to be herself with Dionne, a rare find in a society where pretense reigns supreme. But Dionne began to notice, little by little, the vulnerability that lay behind Karen's composed professionalism. Dionne's affection and compassion for Karen were further heightened by her unusual humility and extreme self-denial. Grace was hard to come by in that society, especially for the flawless, and Karen was certainly not one of them. Even though their friendship was never in the tabloids, it had a profound effect on Dionne. Dionne kept praising Karen after her death in 1983, praising her artwork and praising her compassion, humor, and quiet strength. She felt an even stronger connection to the family through her relationship with Richard Carpenter. Rather than being immobilized by sadness, Dionne found Karen's memory preserved in the lovely times they spent together. It was an unspoken bond, not a secret, but unique to those who know that the best friendships aren't meant to be seen. The Regency Hotel in New York City was the setting for a fateful meeting between Dionne Warwick and an emotionally charged individual in the latter half of 1982. She encountered Karen Carpenter, a person she had grown to respect and adore one day. Rather than the unexpectedness of the meeting, Dionne was taken aback by Karen's remarkable weight reduction. Karen had become dangerously thin, despite her former vivacity and vitality. Dionne had no idea that Karen was fighting anorexia nervosa, a mental and physical illness that had devastated her. An afternoon visit to Karen's suite was scheduled by Dionne, who was determined not to let the opportunity pass without making a connection. Dionne was profoundly affected by the 4-hour talk that transpired during that visit. Karen initially discussed her health at that private appointment. While seeing a doctor in New York, she informed Dionne she was making great strides in getting well. Her words carried an air of calm resolve that offered Dionne optimism. She trusted Karen not just because of their relationship, but also because of her genuine, open, and optimistic demeanor. At an awards picture session in Los Angeles in January 1983, a month later, they ran into one other again. Karen, who has put on a few pounds, patted Dionne on the shoulder while laughing at her expression. With a hint of optimism that Karen may be making progress, she taunted, "I have an ass again," and the two ladies couldn't help but break into laughter. Dionne felt relieved and happy because of it. The optimism, however, was short-lived. Karen Carpenter's protracted struggle with anorexia led to problems that ultimately led to her unexpected death from heart failure on February 4, 1983. Her age was just 32. After their recent promising encounters, Dionne was stunned to hear the news. Instead than wallow in grief, Dionne saw her friend Karen's family rejoice in all the good that Karen had done in this world during her burial. Dionne found solace in the knowledge that Karen's music would continue to uphold her spirit, even while the grief of loss persisted. Karen Carpenter took the daring and introspective choice to release a solo album in 1979, apart from the Carpenters label. Phil Ramone, a famed producer, and 8ANDM Records gave her the go-light to start recording in New York. The recordings, which included prominent studio musicians, were a radical change from the duo's usual sound, veering more into seductive and aggressive adult contemporary rhythms, soft rock, and modern pop. Karen saw this record as a way to distinguish herself, a chance to be recognized for more than just her part in the pair and the innocent persona that characterized her career. Richard Carpenter, her brother, and AANDM officials were among those who voiced their disapproval of the direction the album was taking by early 1980. The label was worried about releasing such a departure from their previous work, and Richard, who was getting over his own difficulties with prescription drugs, was unhappy with the album's trajectory. The record was eventually shelved indefinitely, even though it was nearly finished. Devastated was Karen. A watershed moment came when her solo project was rejected. The emotional wounds persisted even though she kept performing with Richard. She had gone against her natural inclinations and followed her gut, only to be informed that her voice wasn't sufficient on its own. She vented her frustrations in interviews and one-on-one chats, but she rarely publicly attacked others. A lot of her dreams were unfulfilled in her work, and her quiet was a reflection of that. The long-lost solo album, Karen Carpenter, was not released by AANDM until 1996, a full 13 years after her passing. At that point, her once crystal-clear voice was enveloped with subtle aggressiveness, and listeners could hear a rebellious, more adult Karen. If I Had You and My Body Keeps Changing My Mind showcased a musician prepared to venture beyond the familiar sound of the Carpenters and embrace a changing musical world. Its delayed publication gave an unusual look at what Karen may have become had she had complete creative control. Strict marketing tactics ruled the music industry in the 1970s, and female performers were expected to adhere to strict norms. Karen Carpenter embodied a demure, sweet-natured femininity, straight-haired, modest, and always composed, as part of their musically attractive and physically appropriate character presentation. Executives shaped these traits to match the couple's family-friendly appeal, even if they mirrored aspects of her actual nature. There was a lot of pressure to keep up this innocent persona even when not in public. No detail of Karen's performance was spared. Her weight, stage presence, and attire were all carefully examined. Not only did female artists' voices matter, but so did their appearance, demeanor, and ability to convey emotion. Karen was particularly susceptible to this dynamic because of her shy personality and her desire to please. There was concern that her efforts to establish creative autonomy, such with her solo record, may undermine the carefully curated image of the brand. When women dared to establish their own reinvention, they were either silenced or repressed. For Karen, the price of fame was excruciatingly steep. A family that valued appearance, success, and dominance was Karen Carpenter's environment growing up. When contrasted to Karen's brother Richard, Karen's mother, Agnes Carpenter, comes across as emotionally distant and demanding. Many were less impressed by Karen's successes than Richard's, who was hailed as a genius. In an effort to hide their mental instability, the family put on a picture-perfect suburban facade. By burying her issues with self-worth and identity, Karen internalized the desire to please. She learned to downplay her own demands despite her worsening health since she grew up in an atmosphere that discouraged vulnerability. Many people in the late 1970s and early 1980s had a misunderstanding about anorexia nervosa. The mental health condition was not yet seen as significant, and people often attributed it to vanity or lack of willpower. Medical personnel lacked the education to recognize eating disorders, and quick weight reduction in women was occasionally lauded as discipline. The media ignored the toll on Karen's mental and physical health as they covered her career and talents. There was a lack of specialized therapy, and her heart suffered irreparable damage despite patchwork care. The societal discourse surrounding anorexia nervosa as a potentially fatal mental disorder did not begin until after Karen's death in February 1983. This issue was finally given the attention it needed by news programs, discussion shows, and magazines, which led to a shift in public consciousness regarding the risks associated with cultural beauty standards. An unorthodox short film titled Superstar, The Karen Carpenter Story, was published in 1987 by director Todd Haynes. In it, Barbie dolls were used to represent Karen and the people in her life. The doll's flawless plastic appearance stood in stark contrast to the difficult circumstances Karen faced, drawing attention to issues of body image, control, and the subjugation of women's autonomy. The on-screen text and voiceovers by Haynes put anorexia nervosa into context and condemned the business and Karen's family for their roles in her downfall. Superstar became a cult classic and a biting commentary on individual tragedy and societal failure, while being contentious and swiftly removed from circulation. Karen Carpenter's impact has been heavily re-evaluated in the time after her passing. She is now adored for her softer side, as opposed to her silky contralto and impact on soft pop. Renewed admiration for her creativity and the great hardships she endured have been brought to light by documentaries such as Karen Carpenter, Starving for Perfection, 2023, and numerous homage videos on YouTube and TikTok. With more people talking about mental health, her tale is now seen as a pressing example of how institutional forces can ruin even the most famous artists. Advocates and support groups on the internet use Karen's story to highlight the dangers of ignoring mental health issues. She is today viewed as having bravely defined herself ahead of her time by her endeavors to demonstrate artistic independence, such as her shelved solo record. A generation sensitive to the ways in which image management may stifle women's voices finds resonance in her narrative in this #MeToo moment. A lone voice that knew Karen best kept her legacy alive, keeping it near and silently understanding it in a manner that the world is just now starting to grasp. Beyond their work together, Dionne Warwick and Karen Carpenter were friends and respected one another. Their mutual respect and admiration for each other's abilities in the field became the foundation of their friendship. Dionne said, "Karen Carpenter was and is the voice I still listen to with a smile on my face," in the preface to Randy L. Schmidt's biography, Little Girl Blue, The Life of Karen Carpenter. Even though Dionne had recorded the song knowing when to leave herself, one memory that she treasures is Karen's version of the song. They became close friends after that performance. Dionne has frequently expressed her sorrow at the premature death of Karen due to complications from anorexia nervosa, expressing her shock that someone so gifted and kind should be removed from this world at such a young age. Dionne has made it plain that Karen's legacy will live on via both her legendary presence and the personal warmth they had, even if she is reluctant to talk about intimate tributes. Even though it was never in the news, those recollections are evidence of a friendship that was full of admiration and real love. My deepest gratitude for tuning in. Please subscribe for more meaningful tales like the video if you liked it, and comment below with your opinions. And stay put. To continue the discussion, just click the next video on your screen.